OpenAI made 3 major announcements last week, and if you only caught 1 or 2 of them, you may have a completely wrong idea about what's going on. ChatGPT now has ads, they are rolling out an $8 a month plan, and they finally revealed some actual revenue data. All 3 of these happened within the same week, and it's not a coincidence, and I'm going to explain why. So first, Sarah Friar, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer of OpenAI, released information about ChatGPT's revenue. And for anybody thinking that OpenAI wasn't doing well, you were wrong. First, both weekly active users and monthly active users are continuously reaching all-time highs. And they specifically say it's because of the flywheel that they have built across compute, frontier research, products, and monetization. And that's the key word. We're going to get to that in a moment. Investment in compute powers leading edge research and step change gains in model capability. Stronger models unlock better products and broader adoption. Adoption drives revenue, and revenue funds the next wave of compute and innovation. More compute equals better models equals more use cases and more usage equals more revenue, and more revenue means better models. And here's the key. Their revenue growth is directly tied by how much compute capacity they have. So they are literally constrained by how many GPUs they have. Compute grew 3x year over year, or 9.5x from 2023 to 2025, from 0.2 gigawatts in 2023, 0.6 in 2024, and their revenue followed the same trajectory. So 2 billion to 6 billion to 20 plus billion. In fact, just a couple months ago, Sam Altman talked about having 20 billion in revenue, and people looked at him like, I don't think you do, because they had previously shared numbers that were a little bit lower than that. But it turns out he was basically talking about their current revenue. So here's what that looks like. This is compute, and of course, this is revenue on the right. And as you can see, they are completely correlated. That is an insane place to be as a company. The only constraint you have on revenue growth is how many GPUs you can buy and implement. And this is also why they struck a $10 billion deal with chip company Cerebras. Cerebras makes specialized AI chips, some of the fastest inference on the planet, and they're hoping that that's just going to unlock that much more inventory. So one thing they did not reveal in this post is their profitability. They are almost certainly losing money on most tokens that they're generating. But again, keep that in mind as I tell you about these other announcements. So Dr. Gingerballs did a quick analysis about their potential profitability, and let's take a look. So OpenAI has made about $1.20 per kilowatt hour of compute each year for the last 3 years, 0 cost reduction in 3 years. Models are getting cheaper to run, but simultaneously they're building bigger and better models, which are more expensive to run. So that's probably why we're seeing the costs stay the same. It takes 1 kilowatt to run an H100. They make $1.20 per GPU hour. Reserved instances, so if you go to the market and rent a GPU, $2 to $7 per hour per GPU. He even mentions it's probably being run at a loss for everybody. So in the best case, OpenAI is slated to lose 20 billion this year. Signal reminds us that they projected $100 billion in revenue in 3 years, which implies a 2x year over year from here, which, since they've been doing 3x, is not crazy to think that they might actually achieve this, especially when you factor in all of the other products and services that they're rolling out, increased adoption of AI more generally, increased enterprise usage. And again, a lot of people think OpenAI mainly focuses on consumer, but they are doing quite well in enterprise. I'll get to that in a moment. And of course, an entirely new consumer hardware device to compete directly with the phone. And they haven't even started factoring in ads.
I kind of think of ads as like a last resort for us for a business model.
So let me put OpenAI's revenue into context. Of course, a lot of people are comparing them to Anthropic. This is an article from TechCrunch from just a few months ago. At the beginning of 2025, less than 2 years after launch, Anthropic's run rate revenue had grown to approximately $1 billion. By August 2025, just 8 months later, our revenue run rate is over $5 billion, making Anthropic one of the fastest growing technology companies in history. And Anthropic is primarily making their money from API calls. They almost exclusively are making their money from API calls because that's what their models are known for. They're known for being the best coding models on the planet. And so plugging into Cursor, plugging into Claude Code, plugging into Factory, all of these different products and services are consuming their API calls. And that is very different from what OpenAI is doing, where they are primarily subscription based. And that probably speaks to why they're rolling out an $8 a month plan. Again, I'll get to that in a moment. And here's a source for how that revenue mix breaks down. This is from The Observer: consumer subscriptions 55 to 60%, enterprise solutions 25 to 30, and API and developer platform 15 to 20%. So the vast majority of their revenue strictly comes from monthly subscriptions. And also the enterprise solutions count as subscriptions. They're just not consumer subscriptions. And next, I just want to briefly show you this report published by Ramp, a financial services company, which has really good visibility into how AI adoption is faring. And so if we go down here and just specifically look at model adoption rate, we can see still OpenAI is the absolute leader. And so now enter the $8 a month plan. Just a couple days ago, OpenAI announced that they are rolling out their $8 a month plan worldwide. And the reason I say worldwide is because it was already available in India. And so why did they make an $8 a month plan? Well, they needed a way to capture some of the value of a market that traditionally doesn't have the purchasing power of a United States or other countries that can afford the $20 a month plan. Of course, they came up with $8 a month. So in August 2025, we introduced ChatGPT Go, that's what the plan's name is, in India as a low-cost subscription designed to expand access to ChatGPT's most popular features and help more people use advanced AI in their daily life. And now they're rolling it out worldwide. But why? That's the critical question. First, let me tell you what you actually get with the Go plan. You get 10 times more messages, file uploads, image creation as compared to the free tier. But here's the key. It's all with GPT 5.2 Instant. So although you get access to the latest model, you get the instant version, which is typically a smaller, cheaper, and faster model to serve. And so what they're really trying to do is capture more of the market, but push them towards their smaller, easier to serve models. And what they're hoping is that the smaller and easier to serve models will continue to get cheaper and the profit margins on those models will increase. But profit probably isn't important right now. In fact, at $8 a month, they're probably losing money on each of their users. Now, I'm sure there's a large swath of users who aren't coming close to spending $8 per month in inference, even though they're paying $8 per month. And so I don't have information about what that mix looks like, but most likely they are losing money. So why would they do that? This is intentional. It is called a loss leader. They are trying to capture the market because once you start using a product like ChatGPT, like any artificial intelligence, you become more and more locked in. That is because the more you use the AI, the more personalized it gets, the more it remembers about you, and the more locked in you are, the harder it is to switch off of ChatGPT. So of course, offer it as a loss leader, get people to come use it, get them locked in. And we're only talking about consumers. Once consumers adopt a product, they are even more likely within the context of their company, within enterprise, to adopt it there as well. Imagine you are super familiar with ChatGPT. And then at your company, you obviously say, well, of course, I want to use ChatGPT. That's what I know best. That's what I'm familiar with. Why would I use another AI product? And so there's a confluence of things happening. One, they're expecting the models to get cheaper. Two, they're expecting their ability to serve the models to get more efficient. Again, that's why they made this deal with Cerebras. Cerebras at scale is incredibly good at serving inference really efficiently. And as I said a few videos ago, inference is where the money's at. And this kind of proves it. As we see demand for inference increase, we're also seeing their revenue increase. And this is that grand shift to inference that I've been talking about. And there's an additional flywheel that happens. As they get more users, they're collecting more data. All of that data is then used to train future models. So all of this usage is actually really valuable to them. It's exponential in nature. So this is why they're willing to lose so much money now. This is probably the story they're telling investors as they're asking for more billions and billions of dollars. And then think about when the hardware device comes. Everybody's already locked into ChatGPT. They're looking at the iPhone, which now is going to be powered by Gemini from Google, they're looking at this new device from OpenAI thinking, wow, ChatGPT is really personalized to me. I'm already locked in. I'm already paying a monthly subscription to OpenAI. Maybe I should check out whatever OpenAI is going to be releasing. And as they capture more and more of the consumer market, they will also capture more of the enterprise market. And so this is something that Anthropic is really missing. As long as Anthropic continues to build the best coding models in the world, they're going to be just fine on the enterprise side. But for non-coding knowledge work, which hasn't yet completely exploded like the coding use case, there's still so much potential there. And ChatGPT seems to be the go-to model for those use cases. And so what is bundling? Bundling is selling products and services together for a single price as a bundle. Microsoft has been doing this for years. It is an extremely aggressive and sometimes even monopolistic strategy. And one of the best examples of this is Microsoft Teams versus Slack. Slack came out years before Microsoft Teams. Slack is a superior product in pretty much every way. But as you see here, because of the distribution that Microsoft has with Microsoft Office and Outlook and Windows and everything else that they're already selling, they were able to completely dominate growth. And Slack is still growing, but it's nowhere near what Microsoft Teams is. And again, Teams is an inferior product, but Microsoft would say, hey, you're already buying Office. We're just going to throw in Teams for you. And so it made it very difficult for the accounting department, for the purchasing department in a company to justify having a separate subscription, let alone paying for one where Teams is essentially free at the beginning. And so that's probably what OpenAI is thinking they're going to do, capture as much of the market. And then as they release subsequent products and services, they're going to bundle it together in enterprise. Well, you're already using ChatGPT. Why not use our device? Why not use our coding API? We'll give it to you really cheap since you're already paying us a subscription. Forget Anthropic, forget Google. And that is a very aggressive and successful strategy. And now let's talk about the third pillar of the 3 announcements that were made last week, and that is ads. Ads are coming to ChatGPT. Specifically, they're coming to the free tier and they're coming to the Go tier. So even though you're going to be paying $8 a month, you might still get advertising in ChatGPT. Now, this is kind of crazy because even just 2 months ago, they were saying they weren't going to be doing ads. Every major tech company goes through this. There's examples from Google. In the early days, Google said, we will not have advertising. But of course, they went on to have advertising and it became the best business in the history of all business. Then Meta, making billions and billions of dollars from their advertising. They have free products. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, these are all free products that they monetize purely from advertising. Of course, there's a couple subscriptions here and there, but like 95% of the revenue that they make is from advertising. And so here's some of the announcement. What matters most? Responses in ChatGPT will not be influenced by ads. Of course, they say that. Ads are always separate and clearly labeled. Good. Your conversations are private from advertisers. Plus, Pro, Business, and Enterprise tiers will not have ads. And so here's an example of what an advertisement might look like. So the user is basically asking for a recipe. They give a recipe, and then below it, an ad for hot sauce. Fine. Why is this actually connected to the other 2 stories that I mentioned? Well, I think if they had rolled out ads independently of those other 2 stories, specifically about their revenue details, a lot of analysts may have looked at it and said, uh-oh, they're in trouble because they are scrambling to make more revenue. But instead, in parallel, they said, no, we're making a cheaper plan. Plus, by the way, we're making a ton of revenue. We have 20 billion this year. And by the way, we're going to be introducing advertising now. So it's a really smart communications play. Now, because they have proven that they have the revenue, because they have proven that they have the growth, nobody's going to look at them and say, oh, they're introducing advertising because they are basically going to be out of money in 18 months. Meta made $58 per user in 2025 purely from ads. $58 per user, which is quite a bit for an absolutely free product. Now, imagine ChatGPT having advertising. Would they monetize users at a higher rate or a lower rate? Well, in my opinion, ChatGPT is actually closer to the final intent of a user. And whichever product or service is closer to the final intent of a user, that is where the most money per user will be made. Imagine OpenAI hits 1 billion free users in 2026. It's at 800 million weekly right now, so this is conservative. If they monetize at just 9% of Meta's ARPU, average revenue per user, that's 5 billion in incremental revenue. 18% gets you 10 billion. Full parity is $57 billion per year from ads alone. So if ChatGPT is able to monetize as well as Meta has been on free products, they would make $57 billion per year. That's why they're doing it. There is a ton of revenue to be had there. So in parallel, while they're trying to capture as much of the market as possible, they can actually increase monetization per user. And so that $8 a month starts to look like 10 or 12 or 15 or even $20 a month because they're doing this hybrid paid subscription plus advertising. Again, part of the flywheel. You're giving OpenAI more data. They're building a personal model of you, and thus the advertising will be more personalized and more relevant to you and your needs. And that's what it's all about. It's not only about being as close to intent as possible, but the way you get as close to intent as possible is by having the best information about the user so you can serve the most relevant ad. Now, personally, I hate ads. I am fine paying $20 a month or $200 a month if I never see ads. But remember, a lot of people can't afford that. A lot of people throughout the world can't afford the $8 a month. So they're happy using a free plan with some advertising in it. And you know what? That's fine. That's their choice. That's OpenAI's choice. They're getting a free, amazing product. They're basically getting alien intelligence in the sky, absolutely free. Go ahead, serve some ads to people. OpenAI said they're making a ton of money, 20 billion this year. That is 3x year over year, every year for the last 3 years. And they're continuing to grow. They continue to get all-time highs of weekly average users and monthly average users. At the same time, they introduced an $8 a month plan to capture more of the market. They're already making a ton of revenue. Why not make some more? Why not capture people who can't afford the $20 a month plan? Then finally, they're serving ads. So at the same time that they're making so much money from subscriptions directly, they can now layer advertising revenue on top of that. Nobody's questioning whether they're making money or not. Nobody looks at advertising and thinks, oh boy, they are scrambling to make revenue and maybe they're going to run out of money. No one believes that anymore. That is why the release of these 3 announcements in the same week was really incredibly smart. 4D chess. But there's one company we haven't really talked about, and that's Google. Google is probably OpenAI's biggest competition. As I've said before, they have the hardware with Android. They have the users, billions of them using Google search already. They have frontier models with Gemini. And one thing that they have that OpenAI does not, diversified revenue. They essentially have unlimited funds to throw at their AI products and services. And so when we think about bundling, they already have Google Workspace and they can offer Gemini as part of that, basically free. So really, that's probably OpenAI's biggest competition today. So that's the full breakdown. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. And a quick shout out to Theo, who made a video about this topic and inspired me to make this video. And by the way, if you want to stay up to date on all of the AI news coming out, like these 3 stories, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at forwardfuture.ai. Link in the description below.